in our main topic here on Mastering Dungeons this week, we are looking at The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. We're going to look at this 5e adventure module, as we have in our series of the best of over the past several months.
Mm-hmm.
So what is this about, Teos? Well, I'm going to tell you. This is once every 8 years, the fantastic Witchlight Carnival touches down on your world, bringing joy to one settlement after the next. Its owners, Mr. Witch and Mr. Light, know how to put on a good show. But there's more to this magical extravaganza than meets the eye. The carnival is a gateway to a fantastic Feywild domain unlike anything found on the material plane. Time has not been kind to this realm, however, and dark days lie ahead unless someone can thwart the dastardly schemes of the Hourglass Coven. This takes the adventures from the Witchlight Carnival to Prismere, a Feywild domain of delight. This book comes with a poster map that shows the carnival on one side and Prismere on the other.
Yeah, and if you can find on your team a group of designers that also totally get visual side things and are able to do it, as in Will Doyle and Stacey Allen, boy, are you fortunate, because then it all comes together. And I'm just going to say right now, this adventure, that poster map, the handouts, the thoughtful way that various pieces come together to support the experience is one of the keys here. Very cool.
Yeah. So let me give our regular disclaimer here. We are aware that any adventure that we talk about may not be perfect. It may have flaws. And in fact, many of them, we think that there are more flaws than not. But this series is focusing on what is positive about these adventures and the lessons we might take from them. And in this case, I am not going to have too many harsh words to say or caveats or think about this or think about that, because this adventure covers it all pretty well.
Yeah, indeed. It really does. It's a nicely done, purposeful adventure. Shall we dive into the history of it, Shawn?
Yes, Teos, go ahead.
All right. I love me some history. So this was released September 21st, 2021. There was a regular cover. There's a really cool looking alt cover that I'm holding up with this sort of silvery sort of tone to it, and the Mr. Light's wand on the back and the Displacer Beast on the front. This was the second major adventure release that came out with an impact by COVID, right? Because COVID was still going very strong at this time. And for the announcement, D&D again had an all-online D&D celebration event in early June of 2021. But just before that happened, an Amazon page posting once again leaked the adventure before the announcement. The covers were visible and all of that, and so people knew what was going on. The Wizards folks hate it when that happens. But for the D&D celebration event, they had the usual sort of like people playing games and people emceeing it and interviewing and things like that. This one also had something very unique, which was a multi-step puzzle to solve via a website that essentially replicated the Witchlight Carnival. And you could click on the different places to go to that particular area of the carnival and figure out a puzzle in that area. And often if you solved it, it would either give you a piece you needed elsewhere and or give you something like an Adventurers League certificate. Or like a recipe or something like that from a partnered, cookbook and things like that. Very clever. And solving enough puzzles then provided the end prize of a wearable paper crown PDF and an equivalent AL certificate. You can watch my video on it. I actually went through that, and you can see like all the puzzles. You can actually use the puzzles in your games, which is kind of fun. But it was really neat. That was all done by Lone Shark Games, which does a lot of experiences like this. Very fun.
Yep. What else was released in 2021? Well, we've been talking about these sort of as the adventure being the tentpole, some other stuff that came out. Candlekeep Mysteries came out in March of 2021. Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft came out in May. Fizban's Treasury of Dragons in October, and Strixhaven in December.
Wow.
And that is a lot of content. March, May, October, December. All in addition to The Wild Beyond the Witchlight.
September, yeah. And I recall that year, like I think this is a year that many of us sort of said, whoa, like Strixhaven deserves to be talked about, and it should have school programs. It should have, but it was just, September, October, December, just everything rolled in. People are still trying to talk about Fizzbands or Witchlight, and here's Strixhaven begging for attention, and I think did not get the attention it deserved. So yeah, that was a heavy year, and that was not all, of course, that the company released. Those were just the books, right?
Yeah, they also had the Witchlight Carnival dice and miscellany, like they did with some of the other books,
right.
and a Dungeon Master screen called Dungeon Kit. So
there had
all
been
of that
Wilderness
going
one
on
before that,
right?
And this one this year, yeah.
Beetle and Grimm's had a silver and platinum set for $175 or $500. There was no specific Adventures League season for this particular adventure. There was a light Adventures League adaptation of the Carnival chapter that ran at some online conventions because we were still in the throes of COVID at that point.
Yeah. But that was a big change, and it's a change that I think organized play has still been dealing with this and thinking over, was removing that aspect that had been that when a season came out, you had this parallel set of adventures, and that meant that DMs could pull that into their run of the game, or they could do it instead of, but it meant that you had all these gaming stores and conventions having this themed concept, right? People running Frostmaiden, Tomb of Annihilation, Avernus type content all over the place. That was really good for the game. And so moving away from that theme was a big change that I think a lot of people have said, well, I don't know that was the best move, right?
Mm-hmm. True. WizKids had a great set of minis truly based on this adventure rather than just the generic versions of the monsters. So special minis like the Carnival set, the hot air balloon, which Teos is holding up right now, the Jabberwock, minis for both the League of Malevolence and Valorous Call. Other companies made large versions of characters like the War Duke. So yeah, I mean, we are looking at a lot of very specific minis for a very specific adventure.
Yeah, and they've really you had that Carnival set and some holding up the I forget which is not a mermaid quite, but holding her up in her fishbowl kind of thing. Like they went to great lengths to do this. You have things like one of the Hag Coven. She comes apart, so you can take her and put her on the hobby horse and have her pilot it. And that's sort of like just really, this was a mini set for WizKids that truly reflected the adventure, right? So even though we have had Bullywug minis before, now we've got a really actually Bullywugs that are themed for the adventure, right? Wearing the outfits that they do in that adventure. And so it was really a neat set that just fits, exactly what's going on there. Which is really just super cool and makes it a very unique set, in addition to bringing back those classic characters from the days of old, which is so cool.
Such as War Duke.
Yeah, really great War Duke figure.
There was a DM's Guild release called Domains of Delight, sort of spawned by this, sold to benefit Extra Life. This included information for creating Feywild domains, providing additional lore, guidance on making Archfey, dungeon craft, spotlight adventures, and more. This was mentioned in the adventure book, the first and perhaps last time such a tie-in occurred.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting to see the things that are experimented with. They take time, they take energy, of course.
Publishers Weekly had the best-selling books week ending September 25th, 2021. The Wild Beyond the Witchlight was number 6 in hardcover nonfiction, selling just over 16,000 units. And the following week, it slipped to 19th, selling over 5,000 units. USA Today's best-selling books list for September 30th, 2021, Wild Beyond the Witchlight was number 16.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that because you're just like, this was the number 6 book in hardcover nonfiction, which tells you 2 things. 1, how many sales there were, and 2, that this is all real. Witchlight is real, people.
Yeah, it is real. And who made this reality come true? Well, the project lead, as per usual for one of these books, was Christopher Perkins. The writers were Stacey Allen, Will Doyle, Ari Levitch, and Christopher Perkins, with additional writing by Julian Camarasa, Belle Farmer, Adam Lee, Tamor Ryman, and Morrigan Robbins. The adventure is set for levels 1 through 8.
And let's talk about the premise and the approach here, Shawn. We have 3 hags that have trapped an archfey named Zybilna in temporal stasis, and they've carved up her fey domain, Prismeer, into 3 parts. We'll hear a lot of 3s and also 8s here, and the book even has a part where it talks about, which is kind of cool, the idea of infinity and 3 things, and invites you to find all the 3s and 8s that are throughout, and there are a lot. The characters begin by having to visit the Witchlight Carnival, which travels across the material plane, starts off with a very strong magical, festive, wondrous theme. You will see that a lot here. And it appears on the character's world once every 8 years. And the carnival owners are a pair of Shadowcar elves, native to the Shadowfell, named Mr. Witch and Mr. Light, who can help or hinder the character's efforts to reach Prismeer. And there are a lot of strong themes that are happening here as you unravel, what is going on with the Witchlight Carnival, what's behind the scenes, what's the story of Mr. Witch and Mr. Light, why are they worried about the carnival's fate, and why are other people they're worried about it? What is it that happened to Prismeer? Who is Zybilna? Where is she? What's going on? All of that kind of deploys over time around these wondrous themes and fey themes. We get many, many nods to fey type stories of old, to these kinds of stories, to things like whether it's Peter Pan or what do you call it, with the Wizard of Oz, right? Things like that. A lot of callbacks to these types of properties.
Yeah. So the Feywild is obviously a huge theme here. With a touch of the domains of dread. So we get a lot of cross story between the Feywild and the Shadowfell, and they are supposed to be polar opposites, but they're not really.
Yeah.
In reality, they're strange, they're foreign, they're dangerous. It's just in what ways are they strange or foreign or dangerous? Yeah. And what I found is sometimes, if you have a very sword and sorcery kind of D&D group, to introduce them to the Feywild all at once can be a little bit jarring. It can seem a little bit silly, as if running around as an elf casting fireball isn't silly. But it can be jarring. And what this adventure does really well is it uses the Witchlight Carnival as sort of a surrogate for the Feywild, as a smaller entry point into this sort of storytelling that not just directs you toward the Feywild, it prepares you for the Feywild. Yeah. Because the Feywild has certain elements to it that make it an amazing place to run a game if the players are ready for it. So one of the tropes of the Feywild is there are many rules and laws. They can be very twisted. They can be very strange. They can feel very alien, but they are important to follow. Yeah. So like one of these sorts of ideas are wishes can come true. You can make things reality just by hoping, just by my favorite thing is always Eric Mengi in one of his Greyhawk adventures in Chef, where you come to a sign and you're trying to get to a town and you have no way of knowing how to get to the town, and the signs are blank, and all you have to do is write the name of the town on the sign that you want to go to, and that's the way you go. Yeah. Right. It's this sort of thing that the Feywild that entertains, but also gives you a power to follow these rules and become better off for it.
And if I can add, this is the kind of thing that is really jarring for some groups, right? And I used that piece in the very first epic because I thought it was so fun, that idea of a blank sign. But there was, if I recall the original setup, there's a blank sign and there are many others that are written out with these horrible sounding things. And you know you need to go to this one place and it's not on the signpost. And I think the blank one might be on the ground or something like, so you have to put it up and then spin it. But there's a table of very powerful characters that were known as like the powerful characters. They went to every single one of those locations, fought all these horrible things, killed all of these things. They're taking forever, right? Everybody's watching them kind of laughing because they just can't think of that there's a different way to solve this. And those are some of the things that, as DM, as play group, you have to figure out whether your group is whether you as DM will like this, whether your group will like this. And you're right, that the setup of the carnival is perfect because by the end of it, you can go, and that's enough for us, or, oh man, this is so much fun. Okay, we've calibrated to this new way of playing. Let's keep going and see what we can do.
And I just realized one of the premises that might be most important, it should have been in the introduction, was this adventure is written so that you can go through the entire campaign, succeed spectacularly with never having roll a dice in anger, right? No combat.
Right, no combat, yeah.
I talked to someone this past weekend who ran 2 combats in the entire campaign.
Wow.
And one was sort of accidental and the other one was at the end of the adventure. And so if that's something that you would be proud to say and would have fun in doing, this is an adventure you should check out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just the adventure itself, but how it is structured.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting to me looking at, say, Baldur's Gate 3, a lot of times that's the case, right? You can just talk to a certain group right at the beginning. You say the right things. Well, you can walk around that goblin camp, right? And nobody, they say what they say, but and you can also at any point right click on them and start attacking, right? It is up to you. And this is a lot like that, right? This has that sort of feel of like, well, what would you like to do? Because you could just chat with them and a lot of times, even if they might initiate what seems like offensive actions, like they're stealing from you, you can just be like, hey, why are you doing that? Right. And they'll stop and talk to you. And then they might resolve it and say, yeah, here's your thing back. Let's, we move on. And that can be very fun, especially if you've got a group that really wants to lean into the role playing it. And we'll talk more about how the introduction sets you up for this as well. But there are a couple of other big themes that are going on. That combat optional one is a big one that guides the play throughout the entire adventure. Very, very carefully done, very smartly done. And then there's the cartoon characters. So while we didn't see the main characters of the original animated TV series from the 80s, we do get Valor's Call and League of Malevolence. And this is a combination of people that showed up in the adventure, like Wardook, who I held up before. But we also have additional members that appeared in certain basic adventures. We even have some that appeared only in action figures, and they're sort of pulled into these 2 groups, Valor's Call and League of Malevolence, and given stat blocks and sort of given more lore. So it's neat to see that sort of brought forth. Similarly, Zybilna, we told you there's spoilers, Igwilv, Tasha. This is a really interesting way to bring old lore forward. There was a lot of discussion when this came out. All the grognards had to wrestle with whether they're okay with even Igwilv being Tasha, which was maybe Gary kind of hinted at this being the case. And, but then not only that, but fleshing out who Igwilv really is beyond the lore that had been most known for her. In fact, making that the least of things, a chapter in her life rather than her whole identity, and giving her a new role as a archfey. Really very, very fascinating how they did all this, and I think good. And I think a path forward that can be emulated to make older characters more interesting.
And And if you want to hear more about the design of it, in episode 58, which is in podcast form only, we weren't on YouTube back then, we did interview Will Doyle and Stacey Allen to talk about the design and how they came at it and all that. And it's, if I remember correctly, I haven't gone back to watch it, but I think it's a pretty fascinating look at sort of the design process for a product like this.
Yeah.
All right, we'll jump into the introduction and the overview. What do we get? They put the players' content in the introduction. So we get two new backgrounds, the Fey Lost and the Witchlight Hand. The Fey Lost is you were lost in the Feywild. And the Witchlight Hand is you work at the Witchlight Carnival. So you sort of know a little bit about the goings on there, but you're also just as lost maybe as the players might be in certain ways.
Yeah, and this is a positive review, but I have to put my foot down on this one. This was one that I was negative about before, and I've been negative about with other adventures, which is a background that says that you should know everything about the adventure when the fun of the adventure is discovery. Is at odds, right? And the adventure tries to handle this by sort of saying like, well, if you're Witchlight Hand, you don't need a ticket, and you can figure this out, but the reality is the fun of, say, doing the Witchlight Carnival is figuring out this wondrous land, and to say that you literally work here. And there've been a number of cases like this where it's sort of like you've always lived in Icewind Dale. Well, then how is this interesting? This is you're creating this kind of work and sort of suspension of disbelief breaker that I don't particularly like. But minor quibbles in the overall, and I'm sure lots of people made it work.
Yep. We get two new species, the fairy and the Herringun. The fairy being, as what you might expect, a fey creature of small stature that can fly around. The Herringun is the rabbit folk. So you are good at jumping and hopping and skidding your way out of trouble.
Yeah, and there had been an Earth Arcana that introduced these two and asked for feedback, as well as I think two others that then didn't make forward, which is always interesting too. Kind of tying into last week how we talked about when they tell you about why they made certain choices, right? These were somewhere when the book came up, you're like, oh, okay, well, it's just these two, but they were very well done. A lot of people had fun with the Herringun, especially, jumping around and doing neat things. And yeah.
We get two adventure hooks. One is called Lost Things, and this is sort of the more interesting of the two in terms of tying the characters into not just the Witchlight Carnival, but the entirety of the adventure. Lost Things is you were at the Witchlight Carnival when it was here 8 years ago as a child, and you lost something that was very, very valuable to you. Now it's back. The carnival's back, and you want to know what happened. Where did this thing that I loved go? Is it still here? Yeah. Is it in the lost and found? And so that is a hook that you can bring players back into, bring them into the adventure with that. The Warlock's Quest is a more traditional hook of, a patron asks you to go look into why something. Yeah,
and the Warlock
happening
is pacted to Zybilna, and so he's like, I don't know why I'm not hearing from my pact. She lives in the world of Presmere. Go to this carnival and figure out what's going on, which is fine. But yeah, I agree. It's the least interesting. When we ran the 2-hour AL adventure, which Will and Stacey worked on as well, that event assumed lost things. And that was one of the fun things in running it, was asking the table, what did you lose? And have people come up with, whatever it was, my sense of humor, or, my favorite sock, or who knows what it is. But that was, it's such a great way to start identifying who your character is. Really clever way. I love that for this adventure a lot.
Yep. We also get a story tracker, and it's there in the book. You can download it as well. And this is a way the adventure asks you to use it and gives you prompts to say, when you do this encounter, make a note of blank, make a note of which character did this, make a note if they worked with or against this NPC, right? Make these notes, which will then come up later. And it is, you can tell a lot of thought went into this process of thinking ahead of what information would be needed where, and get something in there that the game master, the DM, can use. And this is really a precursor to the campaign journal. If you look on page 128 of the 5.5 Dungeon Master's Guide, I was like, I looked at this, I looked at the story tracker. I was like, where have I seen this before? I feel like I've seen it somewhere. And I flipped to the campaign journal. I'm like, oh, it's like, it looks very similar to that.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, it's a really neat device. And I like how, throughout the adventure, it'll say, write this down in the journal because this will come back later. And it is a really nice thing to do. I think too few adventures, they just make the assumption that somehow the DM will track these things, or they don't even have these kinds of connections. And I find that when a designer makes this sort of purposeful connection, what actually happens is you create an adventure with lots of implications, lots of important things. If this person said they would give you a gift to thank you for this thing, then it'll be at this location, right? And you get there and it's there, but you forced yourself as designer to put all these hooks because you were thinking about that. And that's a very powerful thing, a very powerful motivator as you design.
This is an adventure where if I was not told ahead of time who were the designers on it, and I opened it up and starting reading it, I would say Will Doyle and Stacey Allen definitely had something to do with this adventure. One of the last projects that I worked on, other than Bound by Blood at Ghostfire, was the Ethereal Expanse adventure, Dreams of the Drowned God. And a lot of the design that I see here, Will and Stacy worked on for that adventure as well. And it's funny to have been developing that adventure and then come back to this adventure and reevaluate it. And I'll be like, I see so many connections between those two. It's really, a fine-tuned, well-written adventure, connecting all of these pieces.
Yeah, and we get there is a missing unicorn horn, which WizKids had a version of it included in their mini set, so you can both pretend to wear it, but it is lost somewhere. And so one of the things you do is determine its location, and based on where it's found, then you're going to have to go locate it. I think there's a default, but it could also be in different places, as well as your lost things can be in various places. And so finding where those are is something you do on the story tracker.
Let's get into chapter 1. So chapter 1 is called Witchlight Carnival. The Witchlight Carnival is a fairground of kaleidoscopic tents and wagons crewed by various wonderful beings, including many denizens of the Feywild. This is no ordinary carnival. It uses magic to travel from world to world across the material plane, visiting each world once every 8 years and setting up business on the outskirts of populated areas. The carnival spends a few days at each location, then packs up and moves to another location on the same world until the decision is made to leave that world and visit the next. The carnival includes a Fey crossing, allowing travel to and from the Feywild domain of Prismere. Carnivals, fairs, circuses, festivals, celebrations, absolutely perfect places, much, much better than taverns, to allow characters to not just interact and socialize and gain information. It allows them to be much more active in their participation with the story.
No, you're right. It's something that we know, like we sort of know what a tavern is about. But when you really think about a tavern, the reality is you don't walk into your local pub and say hi to everybody unless you're Norm. And then you just, you sit down and you drink your beer quietly or whatever it is that you're having. But a fair, a festival, that's where you expect to, play some games and interact and have lots of different conversations with vendors. And wondrous people walk up, and especially if you've been to like Ren fairs or places like that, right? And people, some giant person wearing stilts and comes down and blows bubbles at you or gives you some neat gift and those kinds of interactions, right? You're right. That is a great way to get people active and social in a game. And so it's perfect for this kind of adventure where we want to get people knowing, hey, this is not just about your character sheet. In fact, it's less than ever before about your character sheet or your combat prowess. This is about what you choose to do, how you interact with people, what you want to accomplish.
Yeah. But it also can be about your character sheet, because the juggling clown will pull you up on stage and try to make a fool of you, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you have performance, if you have acrobatics, if you have a dexterity that would allow you to juggle, you then become the performer. You then become the person that role-playing wise wants to do well, and character wise can start to roll those dice and have those skills. And that's the difference between, we didn't have a combat this whole campaign in fifth edition versus in AD&D, because in AD&D, the only time you rolled dice for the most part were if you were in combat, or if you were getting hit and needed a saving throw, or if you were a thief, trying to climb walls, right, or hide in shadows. That was it. There were no skills. There was none of that. So rolling the dice now is much easier, and so you are able to go for longer without combat and still be looking at your character sheet, still be thinking, what do I have? What spells can I cast that aren't just magic missile, that can do cool things like jump or prestidigitation?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a number of pieces in this adventure that reinforce, or in this portion that reinforce how this will play out. This is a really strong introduction, right? This is almost like the level of care for it. It takes up a lot of the book. But it creates a really strong interaction. Whereas a lot of times an introduction is so lean that it almost feels like it's unsupported. This is not the case here, right? We have a number of things. We have an NPC that can act as the hand of the DM. That is a mysterious benefactor, the gnome bard Eliwick Tumblestrum. And we saw a lot of this. Eliwick is a planeswalker, so the Magic the Gathering card set featured her and has her backstory, but she also appears in this adventure. So she knows the importance of what's happening to Pregmeard, what's happening to to Prismeer, what's happening to Zybilna, and so she is watching over the PCs in this stage, which helps if something goes wrong. She could come in and provide information, push them forward. That's really good.
Yeah, I love having that tool that I call them wild cards, right? You have that wild card as the game master to step in without being heavy-handed and say, "Oh, you've upset the guards of the place. Oh, this gnome comes by and talks to the guards and now is leading you in a different direction without having to be terribly heavy-handed about it."
Yeah, and tracking time there. This is something you wrote in your show notes. You can tell this is created by experienced and talented DMs. Yeah, absolutely. And with those who have played in a format like organized play adventures, where you need good sound ways to kind of track it, but also be flexible. And so I love that this system uses the actual poster map, and you put down a little token to sort of track the passage of time. And as they do things, as they interact in different carnival rides, you move it forward. But it tells you, which is so important to say to DMs, like, this is not some shackle, right? You're not imprisoned into running this adventure. This is not labor. This is supposed to be fun. And so if you find that everybody's loving riding these different, carnival rides, well, then slow down the passage of time, But if, on the other hand, you think things are kind of moving a little slowly and the players want to move on, well, then time can speed up. And that's really smart.
And along the way, there are set pieces that happen at certain hours.
Yeah.
And so that helps you as the DM, and the players understand that time is passing. So if they are getting a way too far outside the bounds of what's going on, you continue flipping that time a little quicker so you can get to the set piece that will then bring the story to the characters.
And
not only, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, tell me about the mood tracker, which is also great.
So the mood tracker is a way to keep track of sort of the experience of the players, whether they are feeling it or they are exuding it as they go. So the mood can be very light or it can get very dark. And this is just another way to put in front of the players consequences for their actions. It makes them aware that not only do their actions have consequences, but their actions mean something to the game. So if you have the NPC that's going to be, or the character that's going to be grumpy, that is going to try to cause havoc, you are showing them, all right, this means something. You don't even need to tell them what they mean at the time, but they're heading toward a particular consequence if they continue to act in whatever way they're acting.
Yeah.
And I was talking about trackers. Like Will and Stacy love trackers. In the Dreams of the Drowned Gods, there's a war tracker and a doom tracker. And these have become very popular with Powered by the Apocalypse games, especially since Blades in the Dark came out, of ways to just keep track of things, but also to make consequences understood and known.
Yeah, it's great. And the players can see, okay, there's this kind of thing going on, and they can get into trying to influence things and see that what they're doing matters, right? The fact that you took this step to help this, kid that had lost something, or this carnival hand that's feeling down about something, well, that actually matters to things. That's kind of cool. Yeah. And it triggers various effects, like people wanting to meet with you and so on. That's great.
We get some backstory about the carnival itself that isn't terribly relevant to the forward moving adventure, but it shows the design, how the slightest thing can be really cool, and you can make it important as a DM if you want. So who are Mr. Witch and Mr. Light? We already know they're Shadar Kai. But why do they have this carnival? Well, they traded a carnival that they owned in the Shadowfell that was a dismal, sort of grim carnival. They traded that with someone who owned this one, saying that either, ours is better. No, ours is better. Well, let's trade and find out. So Shadar Kai are particularly gloomy, shadowy figures. And since owning this, Mr. Witch and Mr. Light have sort of become happier, which is definitely a Feywild thing of your surroundings reflect your attitude, but your attitudes can also reflect back up on your surroundings. So it really plays into that idea of the Feywild where wishes or moods or ideas can easily change reality.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And this is their backstories are ones that kind of give you compassion for them and for what they've been through, the choices they've made, what they gave up to be here, and why they would really not want to lose this. And because they escaped their gloomy life by going through the domains of dread in this one carnival, right? In this sort of rundown, scary carnival. And now they're in this happy place, right? And that doesn't, of course, mean that you don't have pressures. There's a lot of real life parallels here you can draw from, right? But it's a nice story, and what it means is that when they're talking to the players, you are well equipped to try to speak as them and to try to impart on them that you might see me as the opponents, but we've got reasons why we're doing it. In fact, we could use your help, and so on. And same thing, like, you've got, I think his name is Burley, with his missing brother Hurley, so the bugbear. Yeah. And he's just got a great, countenance as well. And he's sort of like the enforcer there, but he's got a neat backstory and he could use your help, right? That's such a big deal.
Yeah, all of that where the story of each NPC ties in beautifully with the story of the adventure and can tie in with the story of the characters. And
even I'm holding up the mini of a Kenku who is causing trouble during the adventure. And that Kenku also has a reason why they're doing what they're doing, right? They're trying to sort of actually accomplish a thing that's not so dissimilar from what you're trying to do. They're just doing it in a particular way that is causing trouble that you probably want to stop. But there's an interesting story there as to how they're going about it. And so, which is why these things aren't just combat fests. They're multi-dimensional events, which is really nice.
Yeah, Teos has already talked about the maps, but let's just say it again. The Witchlight Carnival map is amazing. Will and Stacy work on these maps, and I could run a full campaign just based on that map with all of the fun things that go into it. And each section is a little ride or stall or booth or something that's going on. And I just want to talk about one of them as an example. One of the things that you can do is ride the teapot bubble. And what it is it's just a ride where you step in and you're popped out the spout of this teapot in a bubble. And you can float up and get a good view of the carnival. And that in itself is fun. The NPC there is a goblin who speaks in silly rhyme. So if he was going to say, like, let me punch your ticket, he would say, let me punch your bramble thicket. And so it gives you some role playing hooks. And if the characters do the same back, if they start talking in silly rhymes or spoonerisms or whatever, the goblin will give them a magic item. But the ride itself is not just you go up, you look around, right? You could use this as a tool. You could say, oh, we were looking for the person causing problems at the carnival. Let's go to the bubble ride. We'll be winked up and then we can look around and see them, right? So it's not just roll a 20-sided die at the dart throwing thing. Oh, you rolled a 20, here's your prize, right? There's a cool NPC to interact with that can give you magic. There are ways that you could use your abilities, your acrobatics, your arcana, whatever, to manipulate the area around you to further the story. And all of these places are like that. All of these places are multi-use things with just a very brief amount of text that cover it.
It's true. You're right. It's done in a very efficient way, yet creates such a neat experience. And I remember the old D&D official podcast, Shelley Maznoble, delighting on what it was like to do the snail ride race, right? Where you're racing giant snails around. And that was, so much fun. And it really is, right? It's the kind of thing that there's something for everyone here, very carnival-like, that you'll probably enjoy one of these events and just really have a blast with it. And all the NPCs throughout this entire adventure, there is a care given to making them interesting. It's not as simple as like, oh, I'm a displacer beast with butterfly wings. That displacer beast with butterfly wings has a story, and there's a missing, miniature displacer beast that needs to be found, and any number of aspects that go a step beyond your usual light NPC to create something very memorable for the players to interact with, which is great.
Yeah. And so the final thing we learn is sort of an overview of the story. So the characters can learn about Prismeer and its ruler, the Archfey Zybilna. The carnival owners, Mr. Witch and Mr. Light, have a portal at their disposal that can give access to Prismeer. And so the characters need to work out a deal in some way to have them allowed to go through that gate. The lost things introduction might be used to say, oh, your lost thing, well, we left it in this place, so you're going to want to go look at it. If you have a warlock patron, they ask you to go look for it. There are many reasons to continue the adventure.
And when you're in the room that has all the magic mirrors that make you look big or small or whatever, there is two characters that want to get married, but one of them has just made a sort of, what is it? They've done they've been hit by there's a image of Tasha, and it makes her laugh, and so then the other guy has run off into this hall of mirrors, and there is there are a couple of fae that represent the Hourglass Coven that have taken over Prismeer and divided it, and one of the emissaries for that hag is a ghoul with a pig mask, and she's sort of promising this guy who's been very hurt because it looks like his loved one just laughed at him, to come through and I'll give you what you want. And you might be able to stop that, but you also see this interaction, realize that maybe there is a two-way mirror that you could get through in some way. And so lots of ways that you can get insights into this and interesting stories. And whether you stop that person from going through or not will impact the story, something you write down in the story tracker, and then maybe you're trying to find them later on and so on.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the introduction in chapter 1 already. So let's just quickly summarize. Chapter 2, 3, and 4 are the 3 realms of Prismeer that have been divided up by these hags. Yeah. So each hither, realm,
thither, and yon.
Hither, thither, and yon. So each is the area that you can explore, and then their lair, which is sort of a mini dungeon that you go into, and then you try to hunt down whatever it is you're hunting, find whatever clues you need to find to move on to the next one.
Yeah, and so if I just say, each of the hags in the Hourglass Coven has a really amazing, like just like these NPCs, like really interesting dimensions as to who they are, why they are. They are competing with the other hags. I'm holding up a mini that is like a big giant water lily that is like the craft that the hag can ride upon, and she creates like miniature versions of herself. I'll hold up the other 2 hags. I already showed the one that has the rocking horse, but just super interesting characters and with interesting layers and hirelings that represent who they are. So each of these layers gets to be 3 layers, 3 hags in each realm and layer. You get to see those essences of their personalities come forth. And as usual, you have options for what you can do. You don't have to defeat them, and you might find wondrous items that you can claim, like, a cauldron and so on, that make these experiences super interesting. And the NPCs that are in them are often guided by what has happened, right? So like in Hither, you might meet this Harengon who has a blue sash, and they are very much, brigands and thieves, but there's a story as to why, and the sash and all of that. And so those encounters are really interesting, and there are things that feel like they're out, not just because they feel like it, but they feel like you are in The Wizard of Oz, or you are in what's the
Narnia?
Yeah, Narnia. Yeah, absolutely. Any of these. And so it's fun for you, but it could be a little different. So it's not like you're just doing whatever has happened there, but you get to experience these kinds of things, and that can be a lot of fun for the players.
Yeah, this is one of those adventures where we're doing a best of, and we could do like the best of chapter 2 and the best of chapter 3 and take a whole show to do it. Yeah. But you're just going to have to trust us to say, if you get a chance and you have the players who these flights of fancy, it tickles their fancy, you do want to pick up and run this adventure.
And the wondrous level is really neat. And I love, I know you do too, Shawn, when an adventure, gives you like a bartender to role play. Cool. That's fun, and I can have fun. But when the story is that a hill liked this goblin so much that the hill itself has an interaction with this goblin who wears a coat of like locks and a coat of keys and a mace made of locks, flail made of locks. And that's so amazing, right? Because how do you role play the hill that speaks through its awakened trees? And it's great because when you first get this mission of, like, oh, I need a key that will unlock this particular person and save them. And then you get to the hill, and the hill is this, sentient thing speaking through its trees. I mean, that as a DM, you are having fun, right? You're doing things you have not done before. And it really teaches you to speak to your party, to your players, create neat experiences for them. And they as well get to play in ways they never have before.
Even if you are not the best role player, even if you are not the joyful expert communicator and actor of NPCs, just presenting this in its simplest form is delightful to most players. And you get to feed off their energy and move forward with your portrayal based on that energy.
And there's so many amazing things. Like, you get to the place where your first hag is going to be found, Downfall, and you deal with the court of the bullywugs, where they're constantly deposing one another. And as you learn this, right, that just creates so much that you can play with. If anything, what I could imagine that this is for some DMs, this adventure is a lot, because it calls on. It's not as simple as, there are a bunch of guards around. It's like, no, there actually is a court of bullywugs who have all these different things going on. And there's, the hot air balloon you can use to escape, and the storm balloon and this other stuff. And so that is, really complicated. And then the getaway gang in thither with and it's so much that's going on with this, talking treant home that they live on, and just any number of interactions like that are very, very creative. And different. What if your lair is a tree trunk that's hollowed out and on its side, right? Just
Yeah. Well, I mean, we need to get toward the end here. Once you go through those 3 hag run realms, you get to the Palace of Heart's Desire, where the Archfey Zybilna is known to grant wishes to mortals brave enough to visit her abode. Her fairy tale palace sits at the heart of Prismeer. On some worlds, she is seen as a fairy godmother, granting wishes for the benefit of the lost, the forsaken, or the betrayed. Sometimes her wishes bring happiness, while other times, not so much. They might bring despair. She can no longer grant wishes, though, because she is trapped in a temporal stasis by the Hourglass Coven. And so you have to free her to repair the damage that these hags have done. But it also carries risks, because Zybilna has a dark side that she has hidden away for years. As Teos has already mentioned, she is Tasha / Ilvig. So it's a fraught ending as well, with
plus the League
some
of
exploration. I'm looking at the time here. We're running long.
But
is there anything else?
I mean, this chapter also has a number of really, really interesting things. If you have never run a Jabberwock, which I'm holding up the mini, that is such a wild monster. Unlike many types of D&D monsters, try out a combat with that and see how interesting that is. I've had that pleasure. Really worth doing. There are a number of elements of the design of this chapter, or the things that are in it, that are super fun. The League of Malevolence and Valor's Call. There is a time stasis aspect, which speaks to my heart because of the Desert of Desolation series, and the first time I really experienced something like that. So there's a lot to unravel here, and a lot that pays off over time. But once you're able to probably have a combat and free Igwilv, then you can get that resolution you're looking for. But it's very interesting. There are any number of NPCs in this, just even in this final chapter, that are so interesting, and interesting locations. It is incredibly creative, right? Witchlight is an adventure that's just full of just amazing creative ideas. And so at the very least, I highly encourage reading it. And skip, if it feels long in some places, we'll skip that because it is dense. There's so much to it, but don't deny yourself those really neat ideas that are found throughout the adventure. They're great.
Yeah. And then you get to the appendices, you get items, just common items like the Cloak of Many Fashions and the Dreadhelm. If you make an item in one edition that makes it into the next edition, right? Because 5.5 did not, 5, I don't think 5e had those. But 5.5 Dungeon Master's Guide does.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So those sorts of things were pulled forward because they're common magic items. They're cosmetic at best, but so fanciful and so loved by players that they make it into the next edition.
Yeah.
Teos has touched on the factions like the League of Malevolence and Valor's Call, as well as the Hourglass Coven. Brand new creatures or variations on creatures like the Boggle. I love these fey creatures from older editions. The Boggle, the Kored, the Quickling,
the
Red
new
Caps.
Campestries. I think those were new, right? Yeah. Singing mushrooms. Those are hilarious. Yeah. Have a great scene.
Yep. If you're going to have a Bullywug court, you need Bullywug Knights and Bullywug Royals. Uh, you get the Jabberwock, as Teo said, giant snails and giant dragonflies, all of the best Fae themed monsters that you could ask for.
Yeah, and there's some nice tools. Like there is a card of each NPC that in the text will say, see their role-playing card for more. And what it means is that you can have these cards out to just share when you are running the adventure, so you can just keep it, holding it there and speak to that as you're running. Similarly, there's a part there's a part where you do your own play at the end of the third in Yon and to sort of defeat the queen. And so there are these little snippets of play pieces that you could, and of course downloadable on the website, so you can download them, cut them and out and use them. And it's just great fun, like for the right kind of group that can go through all these things. Awesome. And I think the adventure also does a good job of speaking to you and saying, well, this is your adventure. So if that's not what they want to do, well, combat it away here, and do that. And that's fine too.
Yeah. Overall, cannot recommend this enough. Yeah. Great adventure, great time. So check it out. Yeah. Anything you want to say before we head off here, Teos?
I always love hearing from folks about on our Discord after show, what they ran. So I'm always curious to hear what parts of this adventure really saying to you and what fun things your groups did, because it's neat to see with an adventure like this, especially people can do some really neat things.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your expertise, Teos. And thank you to our patrons. Our patrons help us keep the lights on here. So I want to thank our Master of Dungeon supporters. In our show notes, we name our Master of Realm supporters. And the Masters of the Multiverse, if they so choose, get to hear me mangle their name. So Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshops, Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Rudy Chainsaw Basso, David Bastiensen, Derek the Bearded GM, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Bush John from Duality Press, Calvin Bridges Avalos, Brobo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, Dead Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimbleco, Kevin Davis, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ted and Guyana of Frog Helmet Games, Ben Heisler and Paige Laitman, Simon the Hunter, Sean Hurst, Hyperlexic, the Jaunty Mantis TTRPG podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, Jordan of Season of War, JR of The Twilight Perspective, JT Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Gail Kiermandy, Schwill from Maine, Leftstria, Chad Lench, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Jaron from Mathis Arcanum, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, Michael, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Dustin from Mountain and Myth Fantasy Maps, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deck of Player Safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip and Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacle Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prunner from Croatia, Joe Rosso, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, David Rideout, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krish Nasimos, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunner Games, Jeff Stevens at jeffstevensgames.com, Josh Edley Wanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talos the Stormlord, Jeremy Talman from Masters of Alchemy, Trace, Ryan Truk, Joe Tyler, Earthworm, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, Vidocles G, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Waziak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Ian Wright, and Z. Walt Winfrey. Thank you all so much for your support. If you would like to become one of these illustrious supporters, you can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd. You can also help us out by going to wherever you listen to this show, giving us a review, giving us some stars, or go to YouTube. Subscribe and like and comment and do all of those things. Feed that special algorithm. So, Teos, where can people find you and your work?
Find me at alphastream.org. I reviewed the Taroka decks and compared to previous Taroka decks, which was sort of fun. Shawn, where do we find you?
You can find me on the socials at Shawn Merwin, or you can follow the podcast itself on the socials at Mastering D&D. So we have been carnivaled. We have been Feywilded. What are we going to do now?
I'm going to try something from our news section. White Wolf described narrative feeding. I'm going to try that out.
I'm going to try some just plain feeding. No narrative involved.
Yeah.